Hey, good to see you. On Inside Marketing this time, we're talking about being customer centric. Of course, every business likes to think they love their customers, but is that being customer centric or just thinking that you are? As usual, I am so grateful to have three marketing experts to help me break it all down. So let's jump right on in. How do you use customer-centric data from a digital analytics point of view and roll that into the overall company value? Well, you'll get an idea of that and so much more as one of my guests on the show wrote a book on that very subject. Is customer-centric just a term used by large corporations with gazillions of customers? Nope. Even smaller, leaner, and more nimble companies can use their data in the same way as larger enterprises and in the same customer centric manner. Another of my guests has already done just that in the online world of RV rentals. Being customer centric is actually a cultural thing. The whole organization needs to be involved. It's crucial that everyone who can benefit from customer insights across the enterprise actually does have access to it. Well, another of my guests has a solution designed specifically to encourage the sharing of data across the entire organization. And as we head into the AI and agentic new world of marketing and sales, how will that affect customer connections and personalization? Well, there's a lot to unpack on the show as usual, and I have just the people to help me do it. So let's join my panel of industry experts. I am super excited today because once again, I don't know how I'm so blessed. I am surrounded by experts in the field of marketing, and today they're going to share a little bit of their wisdom with you. Subject matter today is all to do with being customer centric. What does that actually mean? Well, we're about to find out. So, thank you to all of my guests for joining me. As I always say, being an American citizen, but a British gentleman, we shall start with ladies first. So, Alison Hart. So, Alison, how nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. And it's been such a while. I was just thinking back that we've known each other for a very long time, particularly on the conference speaking circuit, and we keep running into each other. But we haven't been in touch for a while. And then, completely out of the blue, I got a note from you, and I thought, wow, that's good. I wonder what Alison's doing. And would she like to be on my show? And this is how we got here because I think we kind of produced this together. Anyway, Alison, you run your own company now, but you've been involved in the industry and in marketing for a long time. Indeed, you were with Ernst and Young, if my memory serves me well.
hmm
Yeah, so I know you can elaborate a little bit more on that. What are you up to right now?
Yeah, well, I started in the internet back when websites were coded on stone tablets. So I've been here for a very long time, and I've always had a love for data and analytics, which eventually rolled into AI. While I was at EY, the generative AI revolution kicked off. That was about November of 2022. And as much as I enjoyed the activity at that company, I'm kind of a not a very good cog in the wheel. So I went off to do another company. And what I'm doing now is I'm taking customer centric data and using it to value businesses, using it to locate where the value is, as well as to find potential opportunities to grow value. You can think about it like quality of the customer base as opposed to quality of earnings, which might be more of a CFO term.
Yeah, you have this lovely phrase of spear fishing.
Yes. Yes, it's a lot of, so I guess that's where a lot of people get confused. And I wrote a book on it's called The Age of Customer Equity, and it was all about how to use customer centric data from a digital analytics point of view and then rolling into more building company value. But one of the key concepts in that book was that when we think about customer centricity, being customer centric, we're not talking about an aggregate. We're actually talking about individually calculated values. Because in order to be customer centric, the definition is technically that one, you have to know who your good customers are and your bad customers. And in order to do that, you have to be able to see each individual customer. So that's where we started.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Well, great to have you along. I always do ask this question, though. A lot of what we've just talked about, I'll bet we can find on social media. What do we not know about you, Alison?
Well,
That
I
you
guess.
won't get arrested for, by the way.
Sorry.
That you won't get arrested for.
Oh. Well, thank you for putting that qualification in. I appreciate that. I guess I have a love for picking out specific adventures. I don't know why. Like, I'll see something that looks highly adventurous and feel like I have to do it. So last year, they have the tallest building in my city is called the Stratosphere, and it's 1,000 and some steps. And so the game was you start at the bottom and you climb to the top as fast as you can. I thought that sounded like fun. So that was last year, and this year it's hiking the Grand Canyon. So I'll be queuing up for that soon.
Wow, sounds crazy to me. But well done you for being so adventurous.
It's motivating in a weird way.
Great to have you along, Alison. And moving along swiftly, thank you very much for introducing us to Martin Scribel. I hope I didn't mangle your name again there, Martin, but
You did okay.
I was pretty close, I hope. Yeah. Anyway, great to meet you. But as we were chatting just before the show started, it turns out that we had met very briefly before. And as I was saying, I was quite impressed that I hadn't realized until I looked back at your career just how involved you've been in the SEO industry.
Yes, that's where I get my start, and we met somewhere in your background, basically, like I think over a decade ago now. Really grew up on the SEO side, fell in love with the multidisciplinary facets, basically, of it, the being engineering, design, marketing focused. Broadened the scope basically in the last 10 years to be much more marketing wide focused basically. That brought me to RV Share 7 years ago, which is an RV rental marketplace. Like, we bring the community of RV owners basically together with folks like you and I, basically like wanting to go on a great outdoor trip, including Allison's Grand Canyon adventures, and basically like still get to apply a lot of this SEO knowledge, right? But also fell in love with, let's say, Allison's work around customer centricity, customer equity over the last years, and I think bringing that all together in combination with that SEO background has always helped me a lot, basically.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting thing. I think we'll touch on it later in the show as we're talking about this subject of being customer centric. But as you've just touched on there, starting with your SEO background and now being much more involved in the entire marketing process, I think we are going to see certainly this year that SEO, instead of being the red-headed stepchild stuck on the side somewhere, just driving traffic, is actually going to become a much more important part of the integrated marketing and being more customer centric. And
Absolutely.
by the way, I love rvshare.com. It was one of those domains where I didn't have to think, I wonder what they do.
Mhm. This is the one beauty of me as a marketing leader here is I never have to explain what we do. I just only have to explain that we exist, basically, which has been the primary objective as well
Yeah. So
during my
anyway,
time here.
well, thank you very much for joining us, Martin. Great to have you along. Same thing, though. If we can find out all of that about you looking at social media, what do we not know about you?
You get a little hint of it. A dog owner, her dog bed is in the corner here. I always wanted a massive dog. My wife wanted a small dog, so we settled for the small dog. Became the love of my life might be too much of a qualification, but she's a little tiny dachshund. You sometimes have seen her maybe on social media, but let's say that's a little known fact. Besides that, I'm slightly less adventurous, I guess, than Ellison, but can be found, let's say, on ski slopes across the world on a, let's say, a regular basis in winter periods, which is
Wow.
not usually something I post about a lot.
Wow. He's the guy down the slopes carrying the dachshund under his arm.
I wish we could have done that. She's too tiny, let's say, for that to be really safe.
Well, great to know. Thanks very much again, Martin. Thanks for joining
Of
us.
course.
Moving on to my old pal, Jake Saperstein. Jake, how nice to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Mike. Good to see you as always.
Yeah, and we say good to see you. One of the weird things that Jake and I have known each other for a very, very long time. Been going like way back in the day, and we got in touch with each other just a couple of years ago when Jake was working on this very exciting project that he was working on, and we agreed that we should meet each other. And I was saying we should meet in the city in Manhattan, and he said, "Well, I don't live there anymore. I live in Hoboken." And I said, "Right. Well, I live 200 yards away from you in Jersey. We could have talked to each other out the window, never mind on the Jake, yeah, so I'm just touching a little on your career. We know each other from when you were on the analytics team at SAP and working with our dear friend Crispin. But tell us a little bit more about this new project. You started your own agency, and now you have this new marketing platform. What's going on, Jake?
That's right. Yeah, great to be here. Yeah, Data Tinga, I got into it a couple years ago, and I've realized, over the years talking to people at companies of different sizes and industries, there's a common problem where companies have tons of data, but they're not taking a lot of collective action on the data. And so I started to think about, what is getting in the way. And I think when actionable insights are hard to find, often people don't look for them. And so that's a huge opportunity cost for companies. And so Datatinga is a centralized knowledge hub that brings actionable insights in one confine where people from disparate groups can more easily find the insights and take action on them. So it's been a fun project.
Yeah, and it is kind of interesting that there is so much data now, and there's going to be so much more. And we'll touch on this when we're talking about this agentic world that we're going to be living in. And what kind of insights are we going to get from that? But the reason that I mention that is it is a fact that when I worked with you, your team, the SAP team, and loved you all, the one thing that I did discover, which is predominant in all huge enterprises like SAP, is that there's a lot of data that's being kept over here that the guys over there could really use, but they don't know it exists. So they're not going to get to use it. So yeah, I think the future for Data Tinga is going to be really important for people being able to share all of this new data that they're going to be seeing. Jake, I've known each other for a long time. There are a lot of things I could say about you that could get you arrested, but apart from those, what do we not know about you?
Well, I think for those that know me in my career as a digital marketer and software builder, they may not know that ice hockey, was my love for many years early in life. Growing up through high school, hockey was my life. Loved it, played a lot of it, really took over every season of the year. Um, I went to college in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I think at the time they didn't have an ice hockey rink in the whole state of Louisiana, so that
Wow.
effectively ended my hockey career.
Well, at least it sent you in on a different and a more maybe it's equally as exciting route: digital marketing and hockey. I have to say, even as I'm saying that, I can't think of any analogy I can make between the two things, but it's interesting to know. So anyway, great to have the three of you here. Alison, I'm going to come to you first because you and I kind of started this thing with just some chat going backwards and some texts and things going backwards and forward between us. But I was thinking about how long is it that we've been talking about being customer centric, and it's not a new thing. But I think sometimes it's kind of a little misunderstood because, as I've said before, every company should love its customers. So am I not just customer centric anyway? But
Yeah.
it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I did a look around in some of the trades, some of the marketing trades this morning. Apparently in 2025, there's going to be a customer centric forum in Hong Kong, as far as I can tell. I'm just looking at some of the headlines here. Winning attention begins with customer-centric marketing. Customer marketing or customer-centric marketing fuels long-term success. So help us to begin for anybody who's just jumping in, and not everybody's a marketing expert watching this. How do we decide what is me just thinking I'm already doing customer centric to actually being customer centric?
Yeah, I always think the big differentiator has to do with how we speak about customer. If we speak about the customer in generalities or even in large groupings, we haven't really respected the heterogeneous nature of the customer. And that's a really big concept, is that in order to be customer centric, you really have to know each individual customer. And it's important because when you know each individual customer from a data point of view, you're able to combine and recombine that information in very valuable ways, by product, by group, by channel, by business unit. And that kind of grouping and trending helps leaders adopt that long term view of whatever question is on the table. Becomes an easy, it gives you an easy way to answer it. So, for example, I run a survey and I get a whole bunch of customer information back. In today's world, to be customer centric, you might say, well, I listened to the survey and I took action from that survey. And that is listening to your customers, but it's not really customer centric because I haven't honored the individual customers that hold up my business. And when I do honor the individual customers that hold up my business, then I'm able to create not only a durable business, but a lot of satisfying behavior and a lot of value for the people who are trying to transact with me.
So it's kind of interesting that one of the first presentations that I saw that I really kind of raised an eyebrow at the presentation was more, and this is going back a while, more about the mobile revolution and mobile marketing, the whole
Mm.
thing. And I was listening to the CEO of American Express, and he was talking about the opportunities for personalization and being more customer centric. But then he said, we have 30 million customers. How do we get personal with 30 million customers?
I love that volume of data. I don't think that's a problem. We have the machines and the algorithms today to do that. But if you think you're going to figure out how to be customer centric in a spreadsheet, you are totally misguided. That is yesterday's marketing. So today you have to use the right tools to come up with that information. And I love that you mentioned mobile because that is a very rich source of information, whether the customer is individually identified or whether you're looking at their behavior and anonymizing their information. It is a treasure trove of data.
So, Martin, coming over to you, given the background that you have, which has included analytics, and of course now the role that you've got as SVP of marketing for RV Share, it is your job to become more customer centric. And I know that you've been working with Alison, so save us all a few dollars and tell us what she's letting you know.
Well, the trade secrets, Mike, are X, Y, and Z. No, kidding. No, like what I can share is that like a year and a half ago or so, like Elsa and I worked together on a project because what was really becoming important was personalizing and understanding our customers basically. And to your point that you just made, right, about the 30 million customers, like our V-Share over its lifetime had like a few million customers basically. And an RV trip sounds pretty straightforward, but if you look in the underlying data, basically, and this is part of what we found at the time, is that either booking behavior, so let's say, how do you get to the purchase of, let's say, that RV trip, or the RV trip itself is significantly different from person to person, even if you share a lot of the characteristics. So I just shared, right, that let's say I have a small dog, very easy to travel with, but try within travel, right, to let's say book something that is pet friendly, basically, you're still ending up, for example, right, like on the 30th floor of the MGM Grand. And it's like, well, that is not a perfect experience, right? One with a dog, to in general, I would say. So the more we learn about these customers, basically, the more we're able to personalize their insights. And very specifically for our RV share, right? It's like, look, as soon as we learn that you want to take your pet on a trip, a lot of our inventory might not be accessible to you. We're peer-to-peer platform. So let's say your neighbor that owns an RV gets to obviously decide if they want to have somebody else's pets in their vehicle, like which is a very normal ask. Basically, a lot of people do, luckily. But it helps me, let's say, knowing if I need to pre-filter basically all of that inventory out for being pet friendly, right? And I think the more tools that become available to help us become more customer centric, that is going to accelerate that process basically. Like the LLMs are helping in this process. And even let's say compared to when Allison and I did this project a year and a half to 2 years ago, right? It's like we've come a long way in enriching all these data sources basically, because I think getting to that complete understanding of who that individual customer is, maybe as a cluster, like going back to the spearfishing example, right? It's like there's a reason why they swim in groups. And understanding the individual aspect still of a fish, basically, like I think that is where customer centricity really comes into play. And then how we think about that day to day is like, look, you might not be able to target every individual customer differently, but it's like, what are starting at some of these bigger clusters, like the areas that we care about. So an example of that is that pet friendliness, but it could also be an RV. This is more like an industry fact about RVing, but it's, let's say, 80% of RVs like are basically being towed. So like you need the right vehicle to tow the RV with, obviously. If you don't have that vehicle, well, we could filter out 80% of that inventory for you, basically, which would, over time, obviously, like increase conversion rates, help business metrics, help grow the business, provide that long-term value that investors think about. So I think connecting this personalization back also to business results is, I think, what's really important to me personally for being customer centric. But at the same time, it helping basically the customer experience as a whole. Like, don't show me stuff I don't care or need or cannot even leverage, basically.
Yeah. And I want to build on that for just a second, because one really important concept that Martin raised is when you unlock that particular area of friction, if you're calculating your customer centric, customer equity value correctly, you can turn back to your management team and say, we put X dollars on the bottom line. And that's very powerful for getting budget and making change happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
want to come back. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead, Mark.
yeah, sorry, Mike. And if I can take that a step backwards, even too, right? It's, I think, look where you eventually, right, like acquire very efficiently this customer that's going to bring a 5 to 10 year long value, basically. Because that is the multi-dollar question, basically, that most brands want to answer. Is like, look, how do I just get more customers that I can already serve as cheaply as possible, obviously.
Yeah, I want to come back in a minute or so to talk about how do we prove this is all, affecting the bottom line. One thing that does spring to mind, though, Martin, is that when you started this journey with Allison, did you discover that there were areas of data or what we might call customer signals that were available that you didn't know or didn't find, or did you have to, develop some new technology or look for new sources of data?
Yeah, in a few areas, we surely had to look at new ways or enrich customer data in such a way that it wasn't there yet at the time, and some of that had to do with channel information or demographic attributes that you might not always know, right? It's like we don't ask every customer if they're a pet owner, but understanding if that user was a pet owner later on is, for example, like a helpful insight. Coming back to that analogy, I think, and this is what I was talking about slightly earlier, is like, but even in this 1.5 year time frame, right? Like so much has evolved to make enriching this data basically like easier and possible to unlock these new insights, like understanding much more about the transaction and basically giving the tools more parameters, like say like going back to an AI way of thinking about parameters. That is much more accessible now than I think it even was 2 years ago when we ran this project. And in itself, a lot of this data is available. We're in luck that we are a relatively small organization. It's about 100 people basically. So data is much more easily accessible for people like me or on the team compared to sometimes bigger companies that live less in silos. Um, but that gets the job done eventually.
Interesting. Jake, I guess it's safe to say that on your side and what you're doing, you're not responsible for the insights, but they become available to you. So I guess it's up to you to make sure that, like as Martin is saying, that where's this data coming from? Who needs to have it? And then how do you disseminate that? Yeah.
Right. Well, I think centralizing the knowledge into a single hub is really key. Not only to speed up action to insights or getting to the insights faster. The perception is when stuff is easy, stuff is done more. So people will look more for the actionable insights when it's at their fingertips. So that's really key. But also the fusion together of knowledge from disparate teams and initiatives actually brings people together more. It's not just about the knowledge, but it's about building a culture around the knowledge. And so a centralized knowledge hub really knocks off both of those tasks at one. It drives more actionable, uh, it drives more action on data, and then it also brings disparate teams and groups together more often.
Yeah. A while ago, I seem to remember somebody asking me this question about how many people at the agency I was with at the time at Acronym. Um, and they asked me, how many people do you have on your marketing team at Mike? And I said 224. And then seriously, they were looking at me like, seriously? I said, yeah, everybody who's employed by the company is part of my marketing team. And then I saw something recently talking about being customer centric. And Alison, I'll come back to you again, just as we're kind of defining this, but it's not just a different way or a different way of viewing marketing. It is actually a cultural thing within the entire organization. Yeah.
So you're right in that customer centric thinking infects an organization, and the best organizations are very good at pulling it across different areas of the company. It is not just a marketing role. One of the richest veins of customer centric information is the front line. So there was a story in the New York Times a couple years ago that talked about American Airlines secret customer score. And everybody got up in arms because they said, oh my God, they're scoring me. And they were doing a whole ton of analytics to determine where you had flown from, what kind of status you held with the company, and how much pain they had caused you recently. But the purpose of that score was to arm the front line so that the gate agent, when they had to make a decision about what to do for different customers in the moment, they were armed with a score that helped them understand we really want to reward this customer and not that customer. So it wasn't as simple as who has flown the most miles with us and who has the highest rank on the loyalty program, because to some extent that's a self-fulfilling cycle. Instead, by arming the front line with really good information and then pushing that information back into the business, they were able to get a much more satisfying experience for the customer.
I
Just
don't
to
know if
add,
I'm standing in line with somebody else. And they push me out of the way and say, no, the other guy, your score is not high enough. I think we'll have to think that one through. Sorry, I was interrupting somebody. Martin, was that you?
No, it was Jake. Go ahead, Jake.
just to add to that, I think getting those golden nuggets that are very individualized to each customer is so important from really any customer person within the company. And so the next step that's really key is cascading that knowledge to other people that engage and interact with that same customer. Getting everyone on the same page about what keeps those customers up at night, what is turning prospects into customers, pain points, et cetera. The more knowledge that can get disseminated along these lines, the better.
Yep, agreed. Martin, I want to talk SEO for a moment. You know that I want to. But it is a fact because, again, people have always just thought about SEO. It's just like a traffic driver. You just throw as much traffic at a website and see what sticks kind of thing. I mean, that's so archaic. It's so old now, the whole idea. But when I do think about the customer journey, I've always said that the earlier that you could meet somebody on that journey, then the earlier some kind of brand affinity could begin.
Mhm.
So, when you think about the customer journey, a lot of people think, using media or paid search or whatever it is, and try and catch somebody at the checkout, where you can only just shout louder than the other guy as best as you possibly can. But if you know that somebody has a problem at the beginning of the journey and you connect with them there, which is what SEO should be all about, like good PR, that if I help you with your problem, whatever the problem is, and I need to know what it is, of course, but if I help you with your problem on your journey, by the time you do get to the checkout, there's going to be a lot less friction because you've had this relationship along the way. Do you see that journey being a similar thing?
Yeah, and I think it also connects perfectly in this case, right? To like being customer centric. Like I think in the world of SEO, what you're describing, right? It's like we thought about this as like navigational queries or informational, commercial, etc. Like we for a long time now tried to classify, obviously, like what the intent is of a specific query, basically. And surely, right, like in the short term, it might be needed to go after these commercial terms to drive the business value, basically, and for SEO to prove itself. I think where it can also be valuable is connecting it to customer centricity, right? It's like, look, we might not know in every individual customer base is obviously what the keywords are that they're searching for, but if you combine it with your web analytics or product analytics data and having an insight into look where is that user and tie that eventually to their long-term value, you could get a clear insight into like, hey, is this user looking to explore this product? Does it want to upsell, cross-sell based on its navigational queries, basically that it's been using? And I think that that's where SEOs haven't proven sometimes themselves long enough, like basically connecting it to the customer centricity side, because tying the business values that come out of customer centricity work basically like back to SEO results by ranking better, by informing the customer better. Those are all business efficiency metrics or finance metrics, even more easily, where basically the two tie together. And look, my one of the reasons why I slowly tried to escape SEO as a whole was like that it wasn't business driven enough. Um, and I think that that's where still many SEOs can learn and get out of this, let's say, search type bubble, and be much more business focused, basically.
So I think one of the things that we've always had an issue with is that people got used to the idea in the good old days of marketing where it was just brand and channel, and then everybody was just looking at this
Mhm.
linear journey that people went through to get to the end, and whatever way they had of measuring that. These days, we just talk about everything like this messy bit in the middle that Google once called it. I mean, how prepared are we, or better prepared are we now, do you think? And I'm, throw this to everybody in terms of the technology to be able to really track the customer from where we meet them at the earliest stage and then guide them all the way through to the checkout.
I think we're very close to being able to understand that. And there's a process of back matching. So you don't know initially, but customer behavior tends to repeat itself. So you run certain SEO operations, you run certain marketing operations. People land in your assets and they tend to track through those assets in very similar ways. So, for example, some are product confused. Some are product directed. They know exactly what they want. Some are coupon hunters. Some are job hunters. All of that way of understanding the behavior is essentially a signature that's anonymous initially. But then eventually they convert. And at the moment they convert, you can take that treasure trove of data and backmatch all the behavior so that you understand what does good look like. Well, clearly somebody who's a job seeker is probably not there to buy in most cases. But are there problems where I can sort out the product confused and the product directed? Maybe I shouldn't be marketing so heavily to people who are product directed because they already love my product. And I don't want to spend on paid search. I want to use email or a more cost effective channel. And instead, I want to put all that money toward people who are confused and help them come through, help them sort out the charge or sort out what they're going to buy.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing that we always, consider the methods, the opportunities that we have at connecting with a customer or a potential customer at some point on this journey. But I don't know that we have enough data to figure out whether we're contacting them so many times that we're actually pissing them off.
But
And
that doesn't necessarily mean you have to contact them. There are other ways to go about pleasing the customer base, even in the anonymous realm. And Domino's Pizza is a really good example of this, where they had a new CEO that took over many years ago. The company actually outperformed Google over the same 10 years period because of their widely customer centric facing tactics that were somewhat anonymous. And an example was, I think most recently they had a pothole hotline because nothing should get in the way of good pizza, right? Customer centric, you're thinking kind of along the journey. I'm also taking you into the pizza tracker, which is very customer journey related, but I don't know exactly who you are, but I know you're out there.
Wow, pothole tracking. You would never connect that with ordering a pizza, but I guess if they're always late, you can always blame the potholes.
But it
Right.
provides satisfaction, right? And it gives me
Yeah.
a positive kick for the customer, right? I'm making their lives better. And that is the highest and best use of customer centric thinking.
Yeah. And I guess again, that's part of the whole notion of building a brand, building a good brand. It's all about the connectivity between the two of you. I want to talk about this whole new area of marketing, which, from a technological point of view, has kind of always been around, but you have to wait for the consumer to be as advanced as they need to be to have the devices. But I mentioned a video that I hope the three of you managed to have a chance to look at. But the video was the CEO of Visa Card announcing the new Visa agent, and they're going agentic. And the whole notion of having the agent is that you give it the necessary details, build in the parameters, and it goes off and does all of your shopping for you, and all the stuff that you're not interested in buying, toilet paper, toothbrushes, whatever it is. I don't know, but there's very little from that sales point of view that's going on between the customer and the software that effectively says we're being customer centric.
I have a slightly different view on their customer centric approach. I think they're skinning a fraud deflection problem. So Visa had $40 billion in fraud last year, which is the equivalent of giving every single person in California $1,024. It's massive. And I think the whole purpose of doing agentic technology isn't really to be customer centric. It is to deflect all of that cost by using stablecoin and this back end transaction information that's less prone to fraud. Now, that doesn't mean that there can't be a customer centric flavor to it, but if it were truly customer centric, then I think it would be an alliance between the credit cards. So you didn't have to manage Visa and Amex and all your other credit card companies together with their memory about your wants and likes. You're just essentially building a product for Visa, not necessarily for me and my world.
Yeah, I see it strictly as an efficiency gainer, for the company, time and cost efficiencies, getting information faster, moving processes along more efficiently. So I think that the key is when we think about AI, we have to think about, what is AI great at? The efficiency driving. What is AI not great at? It's not really a people person like people are. And so when we get back to customer centricity and the concept of driving lifetime value, that personal connection between the brand, people talking to people, prospects and customers, is really key. And I think even in the era of agentic AI, is still going to be even more important, perhaps.
Well, could be when you think about it. But the opportunity with technology for these kind of companies to become more efficient started with just being able to buy online, and e-commerce is there. And just to be clear, Alison, I wasn't saying before when I saw the video, I thought, oh, Visa's gone customer centric. I thought it was quite the opposite, actually, because I thought this is the more modern version of please listen to the next three prompts. The menu has changed. Well, I'm just like, let me talk to a human kind of thing,
Yeah.
and I'm just kind of wondering um, how you can have this kind of personal connection with a brand or relationship with a brand when you know for a fact it's a robot.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're starting to face is there's a limited time right now to capture the best customers from the classic marketing and branding point of view. And Amazon has done a really good job with that with their whole Prime program. They actually carry about 25% of the high value customers in the entire United States. But not everybody has that kind of reach. So if you have this world of agentic behavior coming up, the question remains, how do I, get to my customer? Now, I don't think that it is completely unhuman. I think if you're seeding an agent to communicate with another agent, there is a certain flavor of personality that goes into that. It's not just transactional.
Yeah, if I can build on that, Mike, I think where it comes back to, right, is like take the Visa example. It's like, look, in an agentic world, right, like, does it matter if this is a Visa credit card or do I just need some form of payment? And what additional value can Visa provide in this case for me as, let's say, a customer that's using an agentic way of basically buying something for my family? Is like the value of Visa seems to decrease basically, and that's part of them for them is it's an efficiency gain. But I think where the value is for brands in building this agentic customer relationship is, let's say, adding the value. And I think, for example, to Allison's example earlier of American Airlines, is like, I am absolutely potentially fine with using an agent to book a flight for me, as long as the airline can still go back and understand what my preferred seat choice is, which I'm not an American Airlines flyer, but I'm with United. Let's say after 10 years, they should pretty much understand that I never fly a middle seat, right? So, like, if that is not a detail that they can take into their agentic way over the next years of assigning me seats and, let's say, booking flights on my behalf, then I think the customer centricity is lacking in all of this, basically. And I think that that's where the opportunity is for the most customer centric, well known brands, basically, to really take a step forward compared to, with all respect for Visa, this not so great example of what I think Visa's aiming to do here, which feels more like a PR play than anything else.
And I think,
So I'm thinking that having traveled as far as I have around the planet for so long, and I mean, I've done like 2.5 million miles or something, they probably don't need an agent uh, or agentic technology to let you know you don't like the middle seat, because every time I board a plane, I'm like, oh shit, middle seat. They get, you get that data directly.
Yeah, well, maybe, Mike, that's changing your own behavior and making sure that you're not ending up in that middle seat. Yeah.
So I wrote a piece a long time ago, kind of forecasting that we were going to get to this particular area with technology, particularly using AI, and it was written around a notion of task completion. And this
Mhm.
goes back to what I understand from information retrieval techniques, because I've been studying IR for a long time. And one of the things that Google has always wanted to do is to help you further down the line, to get you closer to solving the problem and be with you as far as they could get. So the whole notion of task completion isn't just me saying, even to Siri as we have now, or something on my phone, book me a flight to San Francisco next week. I need to be there on Tuesday and come home on Friday. The whole notion of task completion is that your Uber is booked to take you to the airport, your flight is booked, the right seat is, the return tickets, the Uber at the other end. Your hotel is booked for you. So, that kind of support, technical support as it would be, to make all of that happen, which is what we're getting close to now, to make all that happen. I'd be very grateful for that, but I'm not quite sure who I'd have to thank for that. Do I thank Google? Do I thank Apple? Do I thank?
Yeah, but if I can jump in there, Mike, like I think this is the travel calls this like the connected trip, right? Like in the biggest OTAs like Expedia, Booking.com, I've been trying to solve for this, and I've been talking about this for like over a decade. I think now with agents coming online, right, like that is becoming easier and easier. I think what is still lacking there is and we're early on, right, here in May 2025, but it's like the adoption of these agents by all these providers that you will need, right, to make that connected trip. Because like in your example, Uber needs to support it, your airline needs to support it, because they all need to basically be talking to each other. And yes, there is a massive role for the OpenAIs, Anthropics, etc. of this world, basically by providing you with the consumer platform to talk to it and get it done. But eventually, it's similar as how we went through cycles in marketing automation. Is like these systems got to talk to each other still at some point, and not one vendor is going to solve for that. Like the Visas, the Ubers, the airlines, etc., hotel chains, like they will have to implement this too. And only at that point, this can be a connected trip, basically. Or the OTAs need to come in and really solve for it, but they will face the exact same problem from, let's say, the supplier point of view. And I think that there's still going to be a lot of work to be done in marketing teams, data teams, customer teams, basically, to really support all these use cases. And I don't see how that's not going to take years, honestly, to come to fruition.
I think a lot of this is contextual, getting down to understanding when to use agents and when to use humans, right, to communicate. Different types of businesses, different types of tasks call for different needs. And so I think a lot of this comes down to companies using AI prudently to know when to use it and when not to. You think about a B2B business where people buy in committees, people want to be involved, they want to talk to people, they want to be sold by people, right? And so just understanding the context, I think, is really key.
I had this notion of looking at search the way that I do, of particularly when we went through this period of voice search was the big thing for a little while, if you
Oh
remember.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's coming back. Believe me, it's coming back.
Again,
Oh yeah, big time. This, and there'll be a reason for that. Again, it's something else that I wrote a long time ago. The ultimate interface between you and your device is voice. It's not tapping on it with your fingers, it's voice. And all devices, particularly now with AI and what we're talking about, you'll find yourself talking to the microwave one day. Actually, I did that. I don't know whether I was drunk or whether I was seeing. No, seriously. Even kids do that, trying to talk to devices. But where I'm going with this is just back to the search thing, to the beginning of the journey. And it is connected to what we've just been talking about. So stay with me here. The whole notion that I had was concierge style search. And again, it's about this device that we all carry around. So everybody assumes that everything that I do here, or if I ask Siri or do it myself, whatever it is, that I'm searching for stuff. But 60% of what you do on your device is actually service, not search. That's what you're looking for, service. The reason that I coined concierge style search is again connected to traveling. If I'm staying at whatever hotel it is in Union Square in San Francisco, and I stay there quite a lot, and I walk past the concierge, and I just say to them, two guests for dinner tonight, usual, and walk away. Okay, what I'm going to get from the concierge is service. He's just going to book the usual steakhouse for the guests, blah, blah, blah. If I'm in the same hotel, brand hotel in Seattle, and I don't go there very often, now I'm going to ask the concierge, can you find this type of restaurant for these types of people, blah, blah, blah. And then it becomes search. So most of what we're doing, like I say, on our devices is about service. So the best use case I can give there is I dine out a lot in New York City, and I use OpenTable. I've been a member for a very long time, yeah, and I want my points.
Yeah.
So if I ask Siri, or even if I go to find a restaurant, I don't want to search. I just want the agent to book my regular table at my regular restaurant, or more than that going forward, I want that agent to actually be able to come back before I ask and tell me, oh, there is a new Mediterranean restaurant in somewhere else. So again, it sounds a bit convoluted, but it is kind of what we're talking about, the difference between an agent doing multiple tasks for you, yeah, on your behalf. Again, I'll just go back to the who do I thank for that? If
Yeah.
Siri opens Open Table and I get that, or Siri only goes because Siri doesn't have to go to United Airlines website on and go search for it. It just uses the app on my phone. So
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think that's right, Mike, and that's the future that we all hope for. But it's also the highest and best use of being customer centric is to be of service to the customer. And so in an agentic world, the way I see that playing out is you have your agent, whether it's Siri or whether it's some other third party company that will execute tasks on your behalf. And some companies will have an agentic layer that is very data centric. It's very rich and detailed. It knows that red and maroon are related if you're looking for a certain type of product. And all that richness that's sitting in the database will be brought to leverage what the agent can bring back in terms of the purchase or the service or whatever it is you're going after. And then there'll be other companies that don't have those rich data streams. And when your agents go to interact with them, they have to keep coming back to you and keep asking for clarification. You know, do you want the pink ones or the maroon ones because you've asked for red? That's the kind of roughness I see playing out in the agentic world. And the winners will have the data dialed in underneath that because that powers everything, and the losers will not.
Yeah, I think where it ties in, let's say, to the marketing angle for me personally is like you build the brand that creates the loyalty, which basically creates the frequency, but also like adds the context to what you were saying, right, Mike? It's like if you're staying at the same hotel chains, like if you're using Uber all the time, let's say that loyalty builds so much additional context up for agentic use cases, basically, that the agentic use cases are also going to get a lot better, basically. Going back to the middle seat example, going back to, let's say, knowing what your favorite room, obviously, or table in your case was for with Open Table. And it's like that, those types of things shouldn't be too hard anymore with what's already available, right? To make these decisions, basically. Tying it all together across, let's say, a whole trip, I don't think you would succeed today if you try that. Yeah.
Not yet.
I think the
so
handoff between AI and humans is also really important. So knowing when the person wants to talk to a person and having the agent shift and provide that option, faster, I think is key. That will happen, but it's
Yeah.
taking.
Yeah. And I think that the context layer, right, in Ellison's example earlier of providing the travel agent or gate agent with that context, like I think we're now at a point, right, where that is much much easier. Like, sure, we've centralized all these different systems, we put them all together, but when you're on a customer call and you're a customer agent, you cannot review the last 50 calls, right, that customer had with your colleagues, basically, in the customer service center. And AI can summarize that now for you, probably within a paragraph, which you probably can read, right, within 20 seconds. So I think that's where, sure, you might have that context. That context is just too in depth, basically. But AI can help you summarize that, provide you with the right context, like as a frontline worker. And that's hopefully where like a lot of these companies that really want to become more customer centric or already are can provide an even better service and get ahead of the curve, basically.
And
Yeah,
that's areas for innovation as well.
that's right. And on the point of conversational AI and kind of tying it back to the theme we talked about earlier about sharing knowledge across teams, I think that's really key too. So Allison was talking about customer facing roles earlier. I think anyone that's in a customer facing role and team and initiative, it's really important to record that knowledge that can be shared across teams.
how much support do you get, Jake, when you're working with a client for them internally to be able to understand the need, the requirement for sharing data, because you and I have talked about this so many times before, and I've always said, even if I go back to my search marketing world, even just trying to get the SEO guys to work with the paid search guys, and share some data between them. I mean, it is kind of not even just the notion of being customer centric, being a cultural change generally, but the sharing of knowledge across the enterprise. There has to be a cultural change for that. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be easy. I think for anything to be done frequently these days, it needs to be easy. So AI can play a hand in making that easy. We can extract data from documents, from conversations, from meeting recordings, etc. But people need to prioritize that, and that also can start with leadership. People are KPI'd in certain ways, and behavior follows typically. And so I think it's important, having a data oriented culture where teams and larger organizations are really leaning on data to inform decision making really starts at the top. It's really important to cascade that mindset, that DNA down.
Yeah. So we're talking about being customer centric, and a lot of what we talk about because we're used to working with major brands and larger enterprises. That in order to benefit from this, you have to be a huge organization and have gazillions of tons of data to look at. But Martin, with a smaller team that you've been working with, I guess the principle of smaller, leaner, more agile. Even if you didn't have the same amount of data as one of your larger competitors, you could probably use what you've got and move a lot more quickly with it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think with large data, right, like there's much more complexity, there's much more need for cleaning. So with larger data sets, or sorry, with smaller companies, you get over that cleaning hump much faster, basically. And because you're smaller, you're closer to the actual day-to-day work, obviously. So I think then being able to connect all these different sources together to come into this centralized form, basically, proved out to be, for us at least in the last years, like to be relatively, I mean, simple might not be the right word, right? But let's say not as complex as we, I think, initially had thought. And that provides that iteration and innovation a lot faster, basically, because it allows you to just go through the cycle, learn from the data, add additional data to it to enrich it even more. But because there's also so many more tools available, right? Like especially at that smaller scale, those can do a lot of the work for you, basically. That in larger enterprises, you just would have to require much more overhead, basically, to get to the right data answers.
I'll just add that, getting back to the centralized knowledge hub, it's not just about the knowledge itself. The people and the processes are also really important. So if you're looking to build a way of working, a behavior set across different teams, different roles, geographies, a way to do that is to get people not just looking at the knowledge, but who is doing what with the knowledge. Who is putting the insights in the database, who is taking action on insights. So if Cindy from the design team sees that Carl is putting her design into a campaign landing page and getting great results, that connects people and teams. And I think that's really critical.
Yeah, the importance of people sharing the data, as I say. Unfortunately, much as I would love to continue the conversation, keep it going all day, an hour is never long enough. Just some final thoughts, and literally, this has just been going through my mind. We're talking about customer centric, and we went on to agentic. You can't get away from it because it's there now. But one of the things that stood out, perhaps the most important thing that stood out to me when I watched that video of the CEO from Visa, wasn't the notion of what they were doing. I mean, I get the nature of the beast, I could tell. But when the reporter asked him, when do we expect to see this? And I could see that she was waiting for him to say, oh, 2 years, 5 years. And he said, in the next 3 months. I mean, that had a huge impact in the fact that they accept that they can, or expect that they can roll it out in that short of a period of time. Did that surprise anybody at all?
No.
These tools, these power tools are easier and easier to use. Every month there's more innovation coming out. It's faster than ever before. They are not only powerful but full of memory, and that creates a whole context for the company about how they treat customers, what decisions they make, all of that residual memory that starts to sit into the agentic layer becomes the culture that gets embedded in the system. So the speed of it, I don't think is the challenge. Responding in a way that we all find helpful and satisfying and makes our worlds better is the challenge.
Yeah, I was thinking more about the fact that sometimes when I hear these things, I think maybe you're getting ahead of your customer, and that's not a great idea. So, I mean, does the customer want this? Was there a demand, or are you doing this just because you can, kind of thing? And there are so many new, so much new innovation going, as you say, that I can tell that people are working on. But there are things like maybe at the end of this year, certainly next year, you'll have AI will be on your device if you can afford that device. And so a lot of people will benefit from having a small language model based around their needs actually on the device instead of having to wait for a cloud server to do it. That will share the cost of all of the power that's going on. So on the one hand, you'll have what they still call early adopters, and then 50 something percent of your audience is still using an iPhone 11, so you may just well be too far ahead of the audience.
But
Yeah.
that doesn't matter. It's the inevitability, right? Are they not going to do it? They're going to learn a ton by being one of the earlier movers out there. It doesn't decrease their need to do it.
We're witnessing a lot of live experiments these days with AI, and I think that's how people are approaching it. Not all of it's going to be executed the right way, but I think we learn from the executions and we are more prudent, therefore, after that, and getting it right and being responsible with how to use it.
Mhm.
I agree with that and everything else everybody said. And thank you so much to the three of you, my three experts, for joining me. The one thing that I never take for granted is you're all busy people. You've all got jobs to do, but taking the time just to come and share some of these insights, not just with me, but with the audience, of course, is so, so important. So thank you all for that. And will you come back and join me again for another one?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, that is that for this one. Customer centric. What will we be doing next time? Well, don't forget to go ahead, A, like this program, and B, make sure that you're subscribed so you never miss another one. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.